My name is Mark Fleming-Williams, and I am an economy analyst here at Stratfor. And today I'm joined by John Minnich, East Asia analyst, to talk about the China interest rate cut. John, on Friday, China cut their interest rates slightly by surprise. Could you put this in context for us a little bit, please?
So this is the second time we've seen the Central Bank of China cut interest rates in 2 years. And it's actually it's the fourth instance since the financial crisis in 2008. This interest rate cut is somewhat different, though, because it comes against the backdrop of a year of steady declines in the housing sector. And the difference is that these declines are primarily not policy induced. We've actually finally reached the end of a cycle within the housing construction sector and the entire economic model that represents, and the economy is slowing naturally. So this comes as a response to that natural economic slowdown.
Okay, so we've got a precedent in 2012. This is the first rate cut since then. Are we expecting the impact to be similar to what it was in 2012 or different?
Most likely the impact will be different. I mean, the rate cuts in 2012 led to stronger economic growth. They led to not quite a resurgence of economic growth, but late 2012 was another period of fairly high economic growth in China. I think what we're going to see now is, in that case, raising interest rates back then or tightening the spigots on credit were primarily designed to put a cap on growth, to put a ceiling on growth. Now what we're seeing is the government try to put a floor on growth, or on the slowdown, at least, I should say. So this goes back to this idea that in the past, they were responding to an economy that of its own accord was overheating, and they were trying to cap that overheating. Now they're responding to an economy that of its own accord is slowing, and they're trying to put a floor on that slowdown to make sure it doesn't slow too quickly. Because the Chinese government's entire goal at this point is to see the economy slow. The economy slowing is a way for them to kind of, it gives them a window to begin to implement the structural reforms that they need to eventually rebalance the economy to a different economic model. The problem is if that happens too quickly, then they're going to have corporate debt crises, employment crises, et cetera, on their hands. And they want to prevent that because that goes right to the government's bottom line, which is preserving social stability.
So, as I understand it, they're kind of creating a guidance corridor for the growth. It's kind of, they're trying to keep it within a certain range. Now, China is, as we know, quite a varied economy even within China. It's got its own kind of distinctions in the different areas. Are we expecting there to be different effects to the interest rate cut in different parts, or will it be pretty homogenous?
Well, I mean, yes, certainly I would say that different regions will be affected differently, just as different regions are being affected differently by the slowdown. China is internally an extraordinarily diverse, even to some extent balkanized economy. You've got regions that really don't have that much to do with each other economically. So Shanghai has much more to do with the global economy than it does with Inner Mongolia. Inner Mongolia has very little, if anything, to do with Sichuan. So as the economy slows down, we're going to start to see the effects, and in particular, the housing construction sector slowdown play out very differently. We anticipate that regions like Inner Mongolia, Shanxi, where traditionally there's a heavy reliance on extractive materials industries, building materials industries, coal, these are the provinces that are going to be hit hardest. And I think these are the provinces also where things like interest rate cuts are probably going to be less effective. They're the ones where the government, 6, 12, 18 months from now, they're going to have to begin essentially injecting capital into these economies because they're really going to be hit hard by the slowdown.
Interesting. So the challenge for the central bank trying to set interest rates for a hugely divergent country reminds me a little bit of Europe in that you've got the kind of the different geographies and the different issues. But so from this moving forward, what can we expect?
It's virtually guaranteed at this point that we do see the government engage in more economy-wide measures. I think that if anything, what the interest rate cut signifies is that, as I was saying before, that the government is not confident that they can achieve the results they want just with localized measures by injecting, investment or capital directly into banks in certain provinces. So I would say going forward, it's not guaranteed, but most likely we'll see perhaps another interest rate cut, or they're going to lower the reserve requirement ratios for banks. They're going to find ways to induce banks on a nationwide basis to lend more, because that's one of the main problems right now. We have an economy that, even though the government wants to wean it off of its addiction to credit, it's still fundamentally tied to credit. And without enough credit going out and without enough demand for that credit, the economy is going to slow at an exponential rate. But I wouldn't say that there's any real possibility for a return to the high growth days that we saw 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So that's one of the fundamental differences between what's happening now and what happened back in July 2012. When they lowered interest rates in July 2012, because the market itself still had a lot of pent-up demand nationwide, it exploded. It kept going. It was very successful. Now what I think we're going to see is more measures like this that keep things basically stable. Things will continue to slow, but they'll be basically stable. And as long as that's the case, the government is happy because they've achieved their primary goal.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
For more information on this or other subjects, please visit stratfor.com.